Are you a real estate investor? Do you have multiple rental properties, or is this something you're looking to get into? Well, there are many different options when it comes to your insurance, so that is what we're going to talk to you about today. My name is Ryan Turbo Jackson. I am your insurance resource, and in videos like this, I like to break down different policy types, different language, because let's be honest, insurance is its own language, so let me help you. And that's right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to dive into this is our third part in the series about home buying. The first two I'm going to link up here. We talked about new home buyers, your very first home. Then we last week we talked about kind of buying your forever home. So this is kind of the next step in the progression of home buyership. We're talking about different properties where we're either we're going to talk about just a standard rental where you have like a year lease agreement. We're going to talk about Airbnbs, and we're going to talk about flips, because each one of them have their own different challenges and their own different scenarios, so that's going to mean different coverages. So without further ado, this is the top 10 most frequently asked questions when it comes to investment properties. Number one, is it a normal policy? Well, what do we really mean by normal? Is it like your normal home policy? Well, kind of, but no. It has the same coverage for the structure, same coverage for the liability. The only thing is that when it comes to the personal property side of it, on a traditional, we call them dwelling fires in the insurance industry. I know the name is kind of wonky, but it covers more than just fire. Trust me, because I get that question all the time. But it's a policy where we're covering just the structure, the liability. If there is some other structures on the property, those would be covered as well. The only thing that we're really not covering is the personal property of your tenants. Now, as we're going to see as we move into the Airbnb part of it, that's a totally different animal. So if you have questions about that, just hang on, because we're going to get to it. Number two, how is the property deeded? And we've talked about this kind of previously. Whether it's you, the individual, an LLC, a DBA, or even a trust, those entities have to be listed on the policy. Because even though you might own the LLC, you might run the trust, those entities are the actual owners when they're deeded. The policy needs to reflect that in case there is a total loss situation, as well as anything else that might come down the way. Number three, coverage options. Now, this is, like I said, the dwelling fire policy kind of mimics the home policy when it comes to the coverages of the structures. I mean, we have replacement cost coverage. The only difference is that when it comes to a rental or a dwelling fire, if you want to call it that, is there is an option for an agreed value. I have a lot of clients that are like, well, Ryan, I bought the home for $50,000 at an auction. I'm going to put 50 into it so we can renovate and do all that stuff. I would much rather just insure it for $100,000 to make sure that my investment is protected. If there is a total loss to the home, I don't plan on rebuilding it. I just want to pretty much protect my investment and not anything further. That's fine. We can do that. However, some of the coverage options are not going to be there. It is kind of a more watered down policy, but it's a very basic policy. So just so you know, those are out there. They do have the same liability coverage, but like I said, some of the endorsements, like obviously the guaranteed replacement cost, some of your equipment breakdown, things of that, are not available on the agreed value policy, where they are with the replacement cost option. Number four, vacant/flip. I put the vacant there because I wanted to A, remind myself, and B, kind of bring home the point that if you are flipping a house, and it's very company dependent. Some companies require that a tenant or someone move into the property 30 days after we bind the policy, 60 days after we bind the policy. So kind of keep that in mind. If you're in most of the time when you're doing a flip, I mean, we're talking about a few months here. So the any insurance company that we would put that risk with would consider it vacant. Now that leads to a problem where traditional companies really don't want to insure vacant properties just because there's no one there, there's no one living there, the increase of crime and vandalism and everything else, as well as the home could potentially not have heat or water. So just the risks increase. So I do have a company that I write a lot of vacant policies with, and they're totally fine with that. However, they are a little bit more expensive, so kind of keep that in mind. But for the vast majority, these policies are temporary. So even though you're paying for the full year, we only need it for 3 months. That 6 month premium that was unused is going to be refunded to you. So kind of keep that in mind when you are kind of entertaining the idea of flipping a house. Number 5, higher liability limits. If you've followed any of these videos, you know I am very adamant about having the highest liability limits you can, or at least that you can afford. Now, when it comes to a dwelling fire policy, this is really, really, really important because you can't control you can control who's living there, but you really can't control who's staying there, what's going on at the property, what's going on inside the home. So having a higher liability limit is going to help cover your behind if something happens. And we've talked about at great lengths that as far as affordability, liability coverage is extremely, extremely affordable and should be on everything. On everything. Number 6, umbrella. It kind of goes hand in hand with the higher liability limits. Umbrella just adds that extra layer of liability. And one thing I want to point out is that if you are looking for an umbrella for your investment properties, make sure the agent knows, or your agent knows, again, how everything's deeded, because that's going to determine how we write the umbrella policy. If it's you as an individual, no harm, no foul. We can write it up like that. If all of the properties are in an LLC or a trust, that's how we have to write it. Is it any more work? No. It's just that we have to know how everything's deeded if that is going to be the case. And number seven, what if I want to do an Airbnb? Well, even in little podunk Marcellus, Michigan, I know of a handful of Airbnbs around here. So they are extremely popular, they're getting more mainstream when it comes to insurance, but every company does them different. Some companies allow us to write them as a secondary home with we call it a short-term rental, a short-term rental endorsement. Some companies go to the complete opposite, and they want us to write everything commercially. Just because you're turning a profit, you're making money on it. And as you can imagine, that's going to be a whole lot more expensive than a secondary home. So make sure, again, you're talking to your agent, letting them know what your plans are for this property. Number 7. That was number 7. Number 8. Number 8, should you require renter's insurance for your tenants? My advice is absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you might be asking, well, how can I require it? Well, you put it in your lease agreement. Not only is it very inexpensive for your tenants to get coverage for their personal property as well as liability, and even in the rental agreement, you can require that the tenant has $300,000 worth of liability, $500,000, etc. It's written right in the contract that they sign. And on top of that, when you do require it, make sure that if you, the individual, owns a property, or the trust or LLC, make sure that you are listed on that policy, just to make sure that you know it's in place, as well as when it comes to a claim situation, that it's there, right there, and all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted. So number 9, can you put multiple properties on one policy? Well, the short answer is yes, and this is it's kind of a catch-22. Excuse me. Some agents like to have every policy or every property on its own policy. Some, for, I guess you could call it, paperwork wise, or just kind of convenience wise, they'll put them all on one policy. And when you put everything all on one policy, there's certain coverages that span the policy and don't just go for particular properties. So it's always best practice for me to every property has its own policy. That way, it's not sharing liability coverage with any other property. It's not sharing any of the other coverages that would be shared if there was just one policy. But like I said, some agencies, for bookkeeping reasons, like to have everything all on one policy so that they can bring it up easier. I guess, I don't know, but it does save you a couple bucks to have it all on one policy. But when it comes down to it, brass tacks and apple jacks, put put a property on a policy, just one. Have everything be just for that property, and life is going to be a whole lot easier for you as well as your tenants, and your agent's working for you, not the other way around. Keep that in mind. And number 10, what is covered? We've talked about the guarantee, the replacement cost option versus the agreed value. We've talked about what the renter's insurance would cover. We've even talked about the Airbnb, where it's a traditional home policy in some cases, because you're going to have your personal property in there. I'm pretty sure at this time, 2024, we've all stayed at an Airbnb, and we expect there to be furniture, dishes, appliances, things of that nature. That's kind of one of the draws for an Airbnb. So having it written as a dwelling fire where there isn't any personal property coverage is kind of silly. So get to know what your plan is for said property. Now, with that being said, what happens if your plans change? Say, for instance, you start out, you want to have the property, your Airbnb in it all day long. And 6 months down the road, you're not getting it booked nearly as often or as frequently as you had planned, and you're not making as much money as you thought you were going to or had planned. And you're like, you know what? I'm tired of the booking stuff. I just want a tenant in there year round, so I need to change it. I need to change it. No big deal. Your agent should be able to change that, whether it's rewriting the policy or with whatever company they have it with. They might be able just to change it to a traditional dwelling fire. The companies I work with would require us to rewrite the policy, but that's no big deal. Your agent works for you. Keep that in mind. So these can be fluid, but generally speaking, when it comes to a traditional dwelling fire, you have property damage coverage, where it's going to cover the structure. You have loss of income, where if there is a total loss, how would you recoup those rents? And again, keep in mind we're just insuring the dwelling at that point. And of course, liability. So kind of keep that in mind as you're going through this. For those of you that do want to contact me, you can send me a message on Facebook. Here's my office number as well as my email. I'd be more than happy to help you out any way that I can, answer any questions that you might have. And that's the end of our home buyers series segment. This is segment 3. So if you want to check out the other 2, link will be in the description and up here. So keep that in mind, and let me know if you have any other questions, and happy home buying.